So this is a hybrid event. We're doing this on Zoom as well. So.
Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. So I'm just going to introduce our speaker today. Mark H.X. Glenshaw is an award-winning naturalist who has closely observed and documented the lives of great horned owls in Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri since December 2005. He shares his work on his blog as well as on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The owls and his work with them has received regular coverage from local and regional media spanning the spectrum of TV, radio, print, and the web. The owls and Mark had their first national media coverage with an appearance in 2022 on the E! Entertainment Network show Welcome Home, Nikki Glaser. Glaser?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Glaser.
okay. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good fun.
Mark does extensive outreach work with the owls. He leads dozens of owl prowls in Forest Park each year. I love that. Owl prowls.
I wish I could say I came up with that term. That's so fun.
He also gives scores of talks each year in Missouri, Illinois, and beyond to a wide range of different organizations and institutions. He was awarded the Citizen Science Award by the Academy of Science St. Louis in 2006. Mark is a certified interpretive guide, a certified Missouri master naturalist, and a volunteer for Forest Park Forever. A native of Washington, D.C., and the son of an American mother and South African father, he is a dual citizen of both nations. Mark has his bachelor's degree in history with a minor in communications and journalism from Washington University in St. Louis. I didn't know you went there.
Used to work there too.
Yeah. Mark's talk, Forest Park Owls Hiding in Plain Sight, will cover how he found these owls, basic facts about the species, and he will share many of his photos and videos to illustrate their amazing behavior. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the applause at the beginning. That always makes me a little nervous. I'd really like to thank Jennifer and all of our colleagues here at the Carbondale Public Library for having me here. I've done several talks in Carbondale before. I've always wanted to do one here at the library, so very appreciative for all their help. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming here today. I understand and appreciate how precious time is on a weekend, so thank you for sharing part of your weekend to come here and learn about owls. And I'd like to start today with a quick reassurance, and that is, I think it's important that I reassure you that I'm the right person to be here today to talk to you about owls, because you're all meeting me for the first time. And since you're meeting me for the first time, you're noticing things about me. And I'm sure something that you're noticing about me is the really bad and ever-growing lack of hair on my head. So I think it's important that I reassure you that I really do study owls and not bald eagles. Now, don't get me wrong, I love bald eagles. I'm always excited to see a bald eagle. They're fascinating, beautiful animals. But I really focus my efforts and energies on owls and great horned owls in particular. And this is a photo I took, not of just a bald eagle somewhere, but a bald eagle in the place where I study owls. And that place is something I want to talk about as well. It's a place called Forest Park, located right in the middle of St. Louis, Missouri. And anytime I go, say, more than an hour and a half away from St. Louis, I always like to go over this background because I think it's important to do so. I don't want to assume that all of you have been to Forest Park or even have heard of it or have even been to St. Louis. The last time I was in Carbondale, I was getting my hair cut, and I said, oh, I'm doing a lecture down in Carbondale. The lady cutting my hair said, where's Carbondale? I said, what? I said, are you from the St. Louis area, born and bred? She said, we're going to have questions at the end, buddy, so if you can do that, awesome. I said, are you from the St. Louis area, born and bred? She said, yes. I said, you really need to know about Carbondale. It's a pretty cool place. I was here in January. I was hoping it was going to be warmer today in March. It's actually colder today. So I was like, well, we all know March could be like. So this background, I think, is very important. So to look at Forest Park, let's first zoom out to a nice wide view of much of North America. Of course, Missouri is almost right in the middle of the continent. And as we zoom in closer to Missouri and some of its lovely neighbors, including Illinois. We see that St. Louis is right there on the border with Illinois. And it's on the far east side of Missouri, but right in the middle of Missouri, north and south. So this region of Missouri that St. Louis is located in is called East Central Missouri. And when we zoom in to St. Louis, we see, of course, the border between Illinois and Missouri. It's that little creek called the Mississippi. I think that's what its name is. But as we look at this picture, if we look at the far left of the picture, pretty much right in the middle, north and south, we see a big patch of land. And that is Forest Park. So let's zoom into Forest Park, and we can see even more clearly how Forest Park is right in the middle of the city. On three sides, it's surrounded by 4 and 6 lane roads, and on the south side, it's bordered by Interstate 64. So when I say it's right in the middle of the city, I'm not kidding. So with this background in mind, we can really come to the key question that comes up very quickly anytime I talk about owls, whether it's something more formal like today or just talking to a neighbor or colleague. And I mentioned that I study owls, and I've been doing so for a long time. And that's the key question. So how did this all begin? Well, before we get there, I want to give you a few more facts on Forest Park. First of all, we've seen how big it is, but how big? It's really big. It's just under 1,300 acres. And that makes it one of the largest urban parks in the United States. And just to put that statement into context, it's not 5 or 50 acres larger than Central Park in New York City. It's 500 acres larger than Central Park. So, very big park. And people love Forest Park. It's an oasis of nature and calm and peace away from the busy city. And it's also home to several of St. Louis region's major cultural and educational institutions. So right there in the middle of the photo, that big building is the St. Louis Art Museum. And just over to the left, to the east, is the St. Louis Zoo. And that's just 2 of such institutions in Forest Park. So between the park itself and these major cultural and educational institutions, people come to Forest Park in big, big numbers. 13 million people visit Forest Park every year. That's huge. Just to put that statement into context, the population of Missouri is 6 million people. So that's a lot of people coming to Forest Park. And the park is very well regarded. And you can take my word from that. And while I'm not from Missouri, I've come to respect the spirit of the show me state. So I will show you the following awards and accolades the park has received in recent years from national organizations and national media outlets. And the park, while it does have things that you would expect in a city park, like playing fields and turf grass and horticultural areas, it also has great habitat diversity. There are 2 types of forest in Forest Park. There's lakes, creeks, ponds, a river system. There are wetlands, prairies, savannas, and approximately 47,000 trees put the forest in Forest Park. So with this background now fully more fleshed out, we can come back to that question, how did this all begin? And that's really the key question, because doing something like this is not something that you just wake up one day, roll out of bed and say, hey, I'm going to go study owls. No, this began in a very natural and organic way, and it began with 2 seeds. And the first seed is something I'm confident I have in common with many of you here today. And that's a lifelong interest in wildlife. Ever since I was a very young kid, probably about his age, I've been fascinated by wildlife. As a lifelong interest, this interest has never gone away. It's had to compete with other interests, but it's always been there. But I found in the early 2000s, this interest in wildlife really coming up to the forefront in a way it hadn't for some time. So that's the first seed. The second seed is more recent and more localized, and that is, I moved to St. Louis in 1995, and I've always lived close to Forest Park. Even before the owls, I've stayed within the orbit of Forest Park. Yes, I have moved around a few times. In the 27 years change, I've been in St. Louis. But even before the owls, I've stayed close to the park. So after moving to St. Louis in 1995 and the interest in wildlife coming up to the forefront in the early 2000s, I thought, well, where could I study wildlife close to home? I didn't have to think too long about it, put two and two together, and I said, oh, let's study the wildlife in Forest Park. And I quickly fell in love with Forest Park and its wildlife because I began to see and eventually photograph a wide range of wildlife, from animals I had seen many times before, like red-tailed hawks. How many of you have seen a red-tailed hawk this month? Cool, awesome. I bet I'm gonna kind of answer this question and kind of answer it too. But I bet any day you see a red-tailed hawk, it could be a regular day, a good day, or not so good day, but any day you see a red-tailed hawk, the day just gets better. And I saw at least two driving down here yesterday from St. Louis. It was amazing. So I also began to see animals I'd only seen maybe once or twice before, like muskrats. And if you're not familiar with muskrats, they're large aquatic rodents. There's one swimming in a creek. Not as big as their close cousin the beaver, but pretty good size. Really neat animal. I also began to see animals I had never seen before, like coyotes. There are coyotes in Forest Park, right in the middle of St. Louis. Now, I did not take this photo, my friend Edward Krim did, but I saw this coyote and its companion on the very same, very cold day, December 21st, 2009. And these coyotes were not in some wild, remote area of Forest Park. No, they were about 100 yards from the front doors of the St. Louis Art Museum. Whoa. Now, I mentioned that my friend Edward Krim took this photo, not only to give him credit where credit is due, but also to point something else out. And that is, Edward is a professional photographer. Me, I am a naturalist who takes pictures. There's a big difference there. I hope you enjoy my photos and videos today, but I definitely want to make that difference very clear. And more than ever, and in a variety of ways, I really began to take a much closer look at birds. Birds like this great egret having a snack over by the ice rink, in fact. And so I was just amazed by Forest Park and the range and sheer number of wildlife to be found right in the middle of the city. But I had not seen owls. I knew there were owls in Forest Park from talking to folks that knew their stuff and reading in good print sources that there were owls in Forest Park, but I wasn't seeing them. But I was not surprised. I knew very, very little about owls. If I was giving this talk 18 years ago, we'd already be done, because that's how little I knew about owls. But I knew enough to know that owls are really hard to find. And they're hard to find not just for one reason or two reasons, but for three key reasons that all work together. They're mostly active at night. They're incredibly well camouflaged, and if that wasn't enough, they fly fast and silently. So in Jennifer's introduction, she mentioned how I lead tours called Owl Prowls. I do about 70 of these a year. I'll be inviting you all on one when we get to the end of the talk. And I will regularly have people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who have never seen an owl in the wild. For these three key reasons. So I wasn't looking for owls in Forest Park. I never expected to see owls in Forest Park. But one day, without even trying, I finally saw owls in Forest Park. Now, you heard that I studied history in college. I was a bad history person. I did not write the date down. Now, history is more than dates and names and places, but those are pretty important. I can tell you it was in late August, early September 2005. Whoopsie, jumped. And at this time in my life, I lived in a different part of the city on the east side of the park. And I had a different job on the west side of the park. On this particular day, I had something we've all had, whether it's school or work. I had a long, tough day. And when the day was finally ending, I thought, well, I could take the bus home or the train home or get a ride from a friend, but I'm not. I need some nature time. I need to de-stress, decompress. I'm going to walk home. I'm going to feel better in 5 minutes, never mind 45 minutes when I get home. And it was such a long day at work that by the time I left, the sun was already starting to set. And by the time I got to this particular natural area, the sun had set even further. So I was walking through this area, looking around, listening. I was about 100 feet past this dead tree, which is still there. And out of nowhere, coming from up high, I heard hooting. And again, I put two and two together and I said, okay, it's pretty dark. I'm hearing hooting coming from a tree. Oh my gosh, that has to be owls. And I listened further and I thought, whoa, they might be near that dead tree. And I go back, and in that dead tree were two great horned owls. Now again, I knew very little about owls, but I knew enough to know that they were great horned owls. Very big, and with two things on top of their heads, which I was pretty sure were not horns or antlers. I thought they might be ears. I learned later that this group of feathers called tufts, Tufts. And I was so excited because I had only seen an owl once before in my life, 14 years earlier, on the other side of the planet in a park near my granny's home in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I was super excited even more because I would see great horned owls for the first time and seen owls in Forest Park for the first time. And I was so lucky because in the next 20 to 30 minutes, I had such an amazing first sighting. In that brief window of time, I saw the owls hoot together. A beautiful vocal and visual display. Gorgeous sounds, these gorgeous motions. I saw the owls fly several times. Huge 4 to 5 foot wingspans. Fast, powerful, silent, like a ghost. Just amazing. And the owls weren't done. What do you put on top of an ice cream sundae? Cherry, exactly. The owl still had a cherry on top moment yet to provide, and that occurred when one of the owls, much to my surprise, chased a great blue heron, a bird twice the size of a great horned owl, and this heron was terrified, and it flew out of there squawking and screaming in panic and alarm like so. That was one freaked out great blue heron. I was one totally hooked naturalist. In 20 to 30 minutes, the owls had taken my love of Forest Park and its wildlife and poured gasoline on that fire. And I walked home, my eyes doing very good impressions of saucers, and I got home and I told my girlfriend Wendy about every second, every moment. And then I kind of paused and thought for a second. I thought, well, what do I know about owls? Okay, I'm done. Let's change that. Time to hit the books. This is the first book on owls that I ever owned. And I bought it at a library book sale. What did I do 20 minutes ago? I looked at your sales shelf. You never know what gems you're going to find. And I remember being at that library book sale and looking at this book saying, wow, pretty cool book. I've always liked owls. I've only seen that one owl. It's $1. Sold. Pull it off the shelf that night, read about 80% of it. Excellent book with which to start. One of the real honors and joys and surprises in my work with owls is that I mentor people about owls. And I always start them with Owls by Connie Toops because it's such a good introduction to owls. It shows so many things. And it also has a great horned owl right on the cover. Now, as good as this book was, I didn't stop with this one book. I've acquired a few more in the last 17 years. I now have over 50 books on owls. And because as a naturalist, I already knew a key thing. Anytime you study anything in nature, whether it grows in the ground, flies there, swims in the water, you've got to do your homework and you've got to do your field work. You got to sit in your favorite chair and learn the facts inside and out. What I'm sharing with you tonight is from a lot of homework, not me spending 20 minutes on Wikipedia last night. But you also got to put on your boots and go out in the cold and the hot and the rain and everything else and see things with your own eyes and listen to them with your own ears. And what's great is that each type of work helps and inspires the other type of work. To this day, I will see owl behavior that makes me say, what the heck was that? I don't understand that. So I keep doing my homework, and then I'll be doing my homework and learning a new fact or getting a different understanding of something, and my feet will start to get itchy because I want to go out into the field and apply this new knowledge and understanding in the field. Now, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it because we're here in the library, and we're going to emphasize this a little more later on. But libraries are a huge part of the homework side of all of this work. So I love presenting at libraries. Libraries are my Carnegie Hall. So I always like to present at libraries. It's a way of me giving back to libraries. So thank you again, Jennifer.
Thank you.
But with a lot of homework and a lot of field work, but also collaboration, what we're doing today, I began to see those same two great horned owls more regularly. And so I had to name them. And I named them Charles and Sarah. And here are Charles and Sarah. And you can see how beautiful they are. And you can see that great horned owls are every meaning of the word great. Beautiful, powerful, and yes, bloody big. These are very large owls. They are the third tallest owl in North America, coming in at 18 to 25 inches tall. So 1.5 feet to just over 2 feet tall. With that height comes a lot of weight. Great horned owls are very heavy owls. They're the second heaviest owl in North America, coming in at 2 to 5 pounds. Now, 2 to 5 pounds may not sound like a very heavy animal, but keep in mind, birds that fly, their bones are hollow, and feathers are as light as a feather. So 2 to 5 pounds, that's heavy for a bird. It's all about this situation. Like if you saw an NBA team and they had a player that was 6'1", you could say, wow, that's a short NBA player. Yes, that is a short NBA player. My immediate family would be a giant. We top out at about 5'11". So very large, very heavy. And the key thing about great horned owls is that the females are larger. This is actually something that's not unique to great horned owls. So Sarah, the female, is on the right. And notice how she is larger than Charles. Charles is a big guy, unlike me. But females are larger, and this is found not only in great horned owls, but the vast majority of the birds of prey. So that hawk we saw earlier, that bald eagle we saw earlier, all the eagles, hawks, vultures, falcons, ospreys, the girls are bigger than the boys. So that's a pretty cool thing. The great horned owls are, and here's an example of, you can see also, Sarah bigger than Charles, Sarah on the left, Charles on the right. Great horned owls are found all over the place. Most widespread commonly found owl in North America. Every state but Hawaii has great horned owls. Every province and territory of Canada has great horned owls. Not only that, they're also found throughout much of Latin America. So this is a huge geographic range. They're one of the most widespread, commonly found birds of prey in the world. But out of this huge geographic range comes an interesting situation, the old push and pull. I need some help from the youngsters here. I am bad with my alphabet. What's the first letter?
A. That's the first letter of my name too.
Cool. You have no problem remembering that. I have a problem. I always want to say 7. I don't know what my problem is. So taking our friend the letter, what was it?
A.
A, thank you. taking our friend the letter A, this is an owl that you can find in Alaska, Alberta, Arizona, Arkansas, Alabama, and I've run out of fingers, Argentina. So this is huge geographic range. So right there, it shows us that great horned owls are easy to study and very hard to study. Because Alaska, it's a little colder in Alaska than it is in Arizona. And Alabama and Arkansas are very different. So with great horned owls, huge variations in what they eat, where and when they nest, their territory size, and then how many great horned owls are found in the area. It's called population density. So this is a key thing to keep in mind anytime we talk about great horned owls, that what I see in Forest Park is not what's happening in Fredericksburg, Virginia, for example. So to study the owls, I go out very frequently. Most weeks I'm there 6 to 7 nights a week. I'm there over 300 nights a year. And I do this for many reasons. One, I love doing this, so you can't keep me away from the park. Two, it gives me a lot of information to work with. So I can compare what happened 2 nights ago with what happened 4 nights ago, 2 months ago, 6 years ago, and now 17 years worth of information on many different things. Where are the owls sleeping? What are they hunting? Where are they hunting? Are they mating? Are they nesting? How many babies are they having? So lots of different information. Timing is very key. Best time to go out to see many owls, like great horned owls, it's about an hour before sunset. You've got some light to work with, and this is also when the owls are starting to wake up. If I went out after sunset, it would be really hard to find them. And it's also important that you wear the right clothes and that you have the right gear with you. So you see me here wearing the proper attire to present for you lovely people in this esteemed institution. Just want to reassure you, this is not what I wear when I go out to study the owls. This is what I look like when I go out to study the owls. Dark, muted colors. You never see me wearing a bright blue shirt. Gray jacket, gray pants, yes, but not dress shoes. Boots, backpack, cameras, binoculars. I know and yes, the car with the license plate Alabama, that's what you saw in the parking lot. That's my car. And I know we've got some sharp-eyed, observant people here today. You've probably noticed that the facial hair in the photo matches the facial hair you're seeing here or seeing via Zoom. And what you're seeing in both cases is winter plumage. And in May, I'm going to trim it down to a goatee, spring plumage. And then in the summer, I'll shave it all off, summer plumage. So if you see a picture of me in the last 50-odd years, you can usually tell generally what time of year it is. So as I go out about an hour before sunset, the owls are starting to wake up. I can see a wide variety of behavior. And the first behavior I see may not seem like a behavior, but it actually is. And that's the owls sleeping. And there's Sarah sleeping away. And one of the things that attracts a lot of people to owls is that they look like, also behave a lot like cats. And just like a cat can go from totally asleep to wide awake to half asleep to fully asleep and then wide awake and every stage of sleep back and forth, the owls will do that too. And sometimes, just like us, they'll get really active and do a bunch of stuff, and then bam, they hit the snooze button and go back to sleep. So it's fascinating to watch them sleeping, and they can go from sleeping to not sleeping very fast. So as they start to wake up, they do what we all do when we wake up. They stretch and groom. And this is Charles doing one of the 2 stretches they do. And that massive expanse of wing and feathers that you're seeing, that's only one wing. Their wingspan from tip to tip, 4 to 5 feet wide. So this stretch I call the escalator stretch. And let's look at a video of an escalator stretch, and you'll see even more so why I call it that. And as they stretch out the wing on the same side of their body, they stretch out their leg and feet. Charles doing the escalator stretch. It looks like an escalator unfolded. And again, that's only one wing. Now, as they continue to wake up, they will groom. And here's Charles demonstrating the amazing neck flexibility that all owls have. He is grooming his tail feathers with his mouth. I don't know about any of you, but I can't scratch my nose with my shoulder or my shoulder with my nose. So he's grooming his tail feathers with his mouth. And they groom different parts of their body in different ways. And grooming is very important. It helps keep the owls clean, dry, warm, helps keep their feathers in good shape. That also keeps them dry and warm, but also helps them to fly silently. And grooming is very important for their personal health, but also social health. I don't think any of us look right now like we did when we first got up this morning. We've all done some grooming. I know I certainly did not look much different when I got up this morning. So let's watch some grooming. And again, they groom different parts of their bodies in different ways. Not to brag, but I generally only use my toothbrush for my teeth. So Charles is grooming his, how do I put it scientifically, his tummy and upper legs, and he does that with his bill. But other parts of his body, like his head, he grooms with his talons, with his toes. They're very fluffy. And that's just part of his grooming. And one of the things I love about the owls is I've seen some of these behaviors literally thousands of times. When it doesn't get boring, it doesn't get old. I can't wait to be out there tonight to see how much Charles grooms, what he does, how he stretches, how many stretches he does. Let's see what happens. But the other thing I love about studying the owls is every night is different, every night is unique. From tiny little differences to, oh my gosh, I've never seen that. What I'm going to show you next is something I've only seen twice in 17 years of studying these owls. We've had a fair amount of rain recently, and when it rains, sometimes they just sit there and get rained on, and other times they kind of seek shelter from the rain. But back in September 2015, it had rained for 2 weeks. That's a long time without rain at that time of year. And it began to rain, and not a gentle little shower, but capital R rain. And Charles moved to the top of a dead pine tree, and you're not going to see one wing spread out. You're going to see both wings and his tail feathers spread out as he takes a shower in the rain. I love the tail feather shake at the end. I saw you notice that. Now, that's twice I've seen that. And I haven't seen that since that day in September 2015, over 7 years ago. Every night different, every night unique. Now, one behavior I don't see every day, but sometimes I might see it 2 days in a row or 5 days out of 7, are the owls ejecting pellets. And this is Sarah, and she's leaning over, and you notice that something is coming out of her mouth, her bill. So right there, something is coming out of her mouth, and what's coming out of her mouth is a pellet. Now, I'm sure some of you are like me, and you can say, oh yes, owl pellets. I know about owl pellets. I've dissected owl pellets. Some of you might be like me back in 2005, and you're saying, what's a pellet? That's a good question. That is a pellet. All the things the owls cannot digest, fur, bones, feathers, insect exoskeletons, even seeds undigested by the animal the owl ate, now undigested again by the owl. It's kind of the opposite of refried beans, if you think about it. All of those things get compacted into this pellet shape in a special part of their digestive tract called the gizzard, not the lizard, but the gizzard, and then ejected out of their mouth. Now, it doesn't hurt the owl, but here's another comparison to a cat. It's a lot like a cat with a fur ball. And just like a cat with a fur ball, just after they get it out, it's very dramatic and should be scored with an aria by Verdi or Puccini. And then a few seconds later, they're fine, back to being their normal selves. Now, before I show you a video of what pellet injection looks like, and I saw your hand, don't worry, we're going to have questions at the end. I'll be here until they call the cops or the cops come home. Before I show you a video of what pellet injection looks like, I want to give you a hint, a tease of some of the things that great horned owls can eat. This next picture is of the first partially intact skull I ever found in one of their pellets. And that is the skull of a wood duck. And if you're not familiar with wood ducks, they're a good-sized duck. Not as big as a mallard, but they're still pretty good size, and they fly very fast, and they're very agile. But one of the owls caught, killed, ate, and digested that wood duck. So let's keep that in mind as we go watch this video of Charles ejecting a pellet. And sometimes with pellet ejection, you get no warning that's going to happen. You're just watching them and then, whoa, oh my gosh, they're dropping a pellet. Other times you get a bit more of a preview. First of all, I noticed that Charles wasn't hooting. And he had been hooting. Because once a pellet reaches a certain point, they can't hoot until they get the pellet out. Like if I have a big sandwich and I take a big bite out of the big sandwich and you say, Mark, what binoculars do you recommend? So I noticed he wasn't hooting, but I also noticed this white patch, and this white patch on his throat is called a gular sac, G-U-L-A-R, sac with no K, by the way. I noticed the gular sac getting bigger, which is also a sign of, hey, something's happening. So I just kept watching, just kept filming, and here is Charles. And then a few seconds later, it's fun. And yes, it is one of those things where it's cool, gross, I'm not sure how I feel all at once. Now, I love you guys reacting to his post-pellet reactions. And this was January 2013. I've seen many pellet ejections. But you notice right at the end how he twitched his shoulder to the right, his head to the right shoulder? I had seen many pellet ejections. I had never seen head twitch to the right shoulder. Flash forward to 2023, I've seen the head twitch to the right shoulder a fair amount of times. The left shoulder head twitch after a pellet, 2 times in 17 years. And only in the last few years And those 2 times were years apart. Every night different, every night unique. So, at this time of year, not only in Forest Park, but also around here in Carbondale, the owls are calling, but they're starting to get on a more quiet side as they nest and have babies. But the fall and early winter is when they hoot together. And when they hoot together, any type of owl, great horned owl, barred owl, eastern screech owl, you name it, when they hoot together, it's called a duet, just like 2 people singing together. And it's how they do a lot of things. It's how they declare their territory. This is ours. It's how they defend their territory. This is ours. Stay the heck out. We're not kidding. And it's also how a new pair of owls court, how they date. And it's also how an established pair, like Charles and Sarah, builds and maintains their pair bond. That pair bond is very important. We'll talk more about that when we talk about baby owls. Now, it's also very helpful because it helps you tell apart male and female, because they don't always perch right next to each other. For example, in this photo, Sarah, the larger female, is farther away from Charles, the smaller male, who's much closer to the camera. So it's hard to tell looking at that photo who's bigger. But 99% of the time, the hoot of a male great horned owl is very easy to tell apart from a female. The male hoot is low, long, deep notes. Hoo, 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 hoo. Very much like a French horn. The female hoot is very different. Shorter, softer, higher notes, and more often. Hoo, hoo, hoo. More like a clarinet or a flute. So let's watch some videos of them duetting. And a duet is like any conversation. It starts slowly and builds up in speed and intensity. So this is early in a duet, what I call first gear. Charles is higher up on the right, Sarah lower down on the left. And as you listen to their hoots, enjoy the beautiful sound, watch how their bodies move. It's beautiful and fascinating. Isn't that gorgeous to hear? Isn't that gorgeous to see? And you notice how it's a full body motion. We can stand and sit and say, hello, good afternoon, how are you? Where are you from? But when they hoot, it's this full body motion. And as they hoot, we've got to talk about that white patch on their throat, the gular sac again. The gular sac makes the hoot in a fascinating way. Air inflates the gular sac gets bigger. Air moves across the vocal cords. But here's the curveball, here's the twist. When they hoot, their mouth is closed. The sound comes through the gular sac. Here I am speaking to you in a room. I would not be speaking this loud if I was at a restaurant with my girlfriend. Well, depending on how loud the restaurant was. But if I was talking with my mouth closed, Mark, we can't understand you. You need to open your mouth. So that sound comes through the gular sac, and as they hoot, they lift up their tail feathers. And like the gular sac, the undersides of the tail feathers are bright white. And the owls, great horned owls, are many different shades of brown and black and gray and orange and white. But all those colors and all those shades, what's going to show up best as it gets darker and darker? Bright white. So it's a vocal display, hey, we're over here. It's a visual display, hey, we're over here, look at us. And you could be out on a cloudy, moonless night and those white feathers are popping like a beam of a lighthouse. So really cool to see. So that's early in the duet. But let's jump ahead from first gear all the way to fifth gear. And in this video, they're going to hoot more in the first few seconds than they did in the entire previous video. So Charles is higher up on the left, Sarah lower down on the right, and they're just going to go back and forth, overlap, all sorts of cool things. And if you listen closely, you might hear this sound. Any thoughts on what that might be? It's a warning call of an eastern gray squirrel. The eastern gray squirrel is saying, oh, the owls are waking up. Run. Just back and forth, back and forth. So very intense duet. And it's just an amazing, beautiful thing to hear. And again, most of the time, that male hoot is very different from the female hoot. Now, as we're getting more and more active, the next thing that they will do is go off to hunt. And to reacquire, to find the owls again when they go off to hunt is the hardest thing to do. Why is it so hard? Well, I'd rather show you this video and you get to see for yourself. I'm going to show you this video and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. Now this is Charles doing a very typical going off to hunt flight. Well, first of all, it's not just gorgeous. Awesome, glad we agree. So, next question. How far did Charles fly? We don't know. He just flew out of sight. Okay, well, where did Charles land? Somewhere.
Tangling place.
Somewhere off in the distance. Did we even see him land? No. Is there sound that we can follow? No, because like most owls, great horned owls fly silently. Sometimes people say, oh, owls fly very quietly. And I remind them that there's a big difference between quietly and I've had these owls fly 1 to 3 feet from me with a 4 to 5 foot wingspan, and you hear nothing. Well, there is one question we all can answer. Is it getting lighter out or darker out? Darker and darker by the second. So early on, studying the owls, this is when I would go home. I would think to myself, wow, I had a really cool night. Sarah did an escalator stretch and a double wing stretch. Charles injected a pellet. They had a really nice duet. So a lot of grooming. Charles and Sarah did a few short flights as they started to wake up more. But now Charles has gone that way and Sarah's gone that way. Oh, and they fly 20 to 40 miles per hour. I knew that I forgot to mention something. Not only silently, but very fast. I'm going to go home. There's no way I'll ever be able to find them again. It was hard enough to find them when I had some light to work with. But the more I thought about owls, the more I read about owls, thank you again, libraries, the more I realized that hunting is a huge part of their life, their daily life, and their life as a whole. And if I don't try to watch them hunt, I'll never get to see it. So let's try to watch them hunt to understand more about them. So reacquire them, the hardest thing to do, but finding them and watching them hunt is also one of the most rewarding and cool things to do. And one of the things that makes it so cool and so rewarding is a sight like this. Beautifully silhouetted great horned owl, in this case Sarah, and she is doing the main method of great horned owl hunting. Perch and wait, look and listen, perch and wait, look, and listen. They are very patient hunters. I've watched them from one branch of one tree for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. And one night I watched Charles from one branch of one tree for an hour and a half. As you heard from Jennifer's introduction, I'm an East Coaster, not only by birth, but also by nature. I must admit, when I get in my car, come on, let's go, move! My East Coast nature comes out a little more. It also helps me become a little more patient. So what do they hunt? Well, this is one of the things that blew my mind and hooked me even further on great horned owls. I thought, as I've started this, well, I'm still learning about owls, but I also know a lot about other animals. That they eat rodents and rabbits and other small mammals and small birds. And I start doing my homework, and my homework says, yes, they do eat all those things, but they also eat fish, amphibians, reptiles, insects, worms, and other invertebrates. That was interesting, but not too shocking. If you can catch a rabbit, you can probably catch a beetle. But then I kept doing my homework, and my jaw hit the ground because I learned that great horned owls eat a wide range of small to not so small animals. Great horned owls eat raccoons. They are one of the few animals that eat skunks. They eat muskrats, minks. Pet owners, they eat small dogs. They eat domestic cats. Remember that wood duck skull? They eat ducks, geese. They eat hawks. They eat other owls. They eat wild turkeys. Remember that great blue heron? They eat herons and egrets, including great blue herons that are twice their size. They even have a recorded instance in science of great horned owl in Arizona killing and eating a bobcat. You look up dangerous dude in the dictionary, and there's a great horned owl going, yeah. So in Forest Park, there's only a handful of things that they can't eat. And this is what applies to the Carbondale area as well. Bald eagles, white-tailed deer, beavers, adult coyotes, adult foxes. That's it. Everything else is on the menu. Now, one of the most exciting things to see the owls go for are bats in midair. And I'm going to show this video a couple of times because it happens very, very quickly. In this video, Sarah is going to come from the right side of the screen, the bat from the left, and the magic will occur in the middle. There it goes. Whoa, going for bat. Jeez. I also do my own color commentary. Free of charge. Yeah, it's all part of the service. Yeah, it's a package deal. So, pretty cool, pretty exciting. Well, let's watch that a little more slowly. So here comes Sarah, like a bat out of blazing along, and here comes the bat. Now, bats are hard to catch. They're small, they're agile. What also makes bats hard to catch?
Flight patterns.
Flight patterns? Anything else?
Sonar.
Sonar, exactly. They have echolocation, essentially airborne sonar. I sometimes wonder, what does a great horned owl look like on a bat's sonar screen? I imagine flashing red and very loud. So here's the bat, and the bat essentially says, oh, bloody heck, I'm going to die. And Sarah says, well, wait a minute, I am hungry. I would like to catch and eat you. So let's go back to Sarah and watch how she goes to this beautiful level flight to check out this fighter pilot, Top Gun, Jedi Knight turn.
Oh, wow.
Now, Sarah is wow indeed. Sarah's not going to try to catch the bat with her bill. No, she lowers her talons, and she's going to try to literally pluck the bat out of thin air. The bat is now one wing length away from Sarah. It's right under Sarah's right wing. Sarah realizes Rats. I mean bats.
That.
Right away.
I missed it. She tucks up her talons and flies off. Now, if you look at the bottom left of my video player there, you see some numbers. Those numbers tell you that all of that took 1 second.
Wow.
It was only in one.
1 second. Now that we've seen it broken down, see what happened, let's watch it not sped up, but at the actual speed at which it occurred.
There it goes. Whoa, going for a bat. Jeez.
So sometimes when it's so dark that you don't see the bat, but if you see an intense turn, a hover, turn, combinations thereof, oh, they just went for a bat. I didn't see a bat, but that type of flight, clearly they're going for a bat.
She actually missed it.
She missed it.
Yeah.
And like all predators, great horned owls miss way more than they succeed. And that was a fact I knew from good books and nature documentaries. Thank you, libraries. But first year, never mind 5 years, never mind 17 years of studying great horned owls has given me a totally different understanding of how challenging it is to be a predator. Because if she misses, it's not like, oh, well, I'll just go to the grocery store and get something. No. She's got to catch and eat prey pretty much every day. Now, sometimes you'll see a predatory attempt and you're not sure what they went for and not sure if they caught it or not. And this is going to be Charles, and he was doing perch and wait, look and listen for about 20 to 30 minutes, looking in this one area. And I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to film and watch you, see what happens. You'll see Charles fly from the right side of the screen. You get a beautiful view of the huge, gorgeous ones. And you'll see him make a predatory attempt, but you won't know what he went for, if he caught it, but keep watching. He caught a small rodent, a mouse, a vole. Well done, Charles. Now, not only well done that he caught it, but Sarah was nesting nearby, and he took it right up to Sarah. So when they nest, each parent works very hard, but in very different ways. The male great horned owl does all the hunting. Remember, the female is bigger, so she needs lots of food. And the female will be on the nest for over 23 hours a day, incubating the eggs and then keeping the youngsters safe when they hatch, and warm as well. So each parent works very, very hard. Now, what I'm going to show you next is from last month, and I was out with a number of my friends and owl mentees, and we saw Charles fly over one of the park's lakes and not make one attempt on a bat and then land. He made one attempt, and then the second attempt, we weren't sure if he caught it or not, and then we saw him coming back towards us with prey in his talons. All right, he caught a bat, and he landed really close to us. He landed like right where that ceiling fan is, so we all had to do the moonwalk and come back here and watch what he does. Scooby just caught the bat. That's Scooby with his mouth full of the bat. So instead of hoo hoo hoo, it was hoo 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 hoo. Let's go back to that second hoot just so you can hear that. I've seen that many times. It is always fantastic and always fun to hear. So very cool to see that. Now I mentioned that I have all these books on owls. Well, where did I find them? I don't want to give you the impression that I went to Amazon and went click, click, click. No, I went to libraries and went click, click, click. And all the books that I eventually bought, I checked them out many times from libraries before deciding I need to buy this book so I can have it right at arm's reach. Oh, I should also return the book to the library, right, Jennifer? It's a two-way process. Check it out, check it in. But this was a great way of finding the books I needed to own, but also the books I did not need to own. So libraries are a huge part of me doing the homework. And I really want to encourage you all to use all the libraries available to you. Talk to whether this is your local library or you go have another library to go to. Talk to them and ask them about library reciprocity. What other libraries are you connected to? Can I get books from other libraries and have them sent here? You will be very pleasantly surprised if you don't know the answer to that. The answer is yes. Also ask them about interlibrary loan, or as it's called, ILL, where you can get books from even more different libraries. So you want to use all of the libraries that you can. It's great that you have SIUC here, but sometimes libraries can be a little scary. And you might be like, ooh, I don't remember the Dewey Decimal. The third grade was a long time ago, or I'm only in the second grade. I haven't learned it yet. That's why I have Jennifer and her colleagues. Ask the staff for help, and if you're good at using the library, trust me, you can always get better. I'm better today than I was 2 years ago, 6 years ago, 16 years ago. And you think about libraries, oh, that's me with summer movement, by the way. You think about libraries and you think books, but also I encourage you to use the databases, a rich source of newspaper, magazine articles, scientific journal articles, and not just for owls, for anything, everything you're interested in. So I want to share with you my owl bibliography. I've got this printed out on the counter over to our left there. I forgot that slide. I'm so sorry. But I use many different books and websites, and I'm always using them and reusing them. So yes, please grab a copy of that owl bibliography. Now, going back to hunting and food, I mentioned they miss, but also they catch. And thankfully, the hunting is good in Forest Park because Charles and Sarah have had many mouths to feed. Since 2006, they have had 23 babies. And yes, feel free to say aw to every slide. The owlets are amazing. We're going to look at some owlet highlights. 2008 was the first year I saw them have 3. Great horned owls average 2 to 3, sometimes have 1, very rarely have 4 to 5. But that year was the first year they had 3. And look at them all right there. And that was also the first year that I named the owlets. And I named them Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. Because yes, I am a huge Simpsons fan. But also for good scientific reasons. Because a female great horned owl lays her first egg, and she starts to sit on that egg. She starts to incubate that egg right away. Most birds lay their eggs, then they sit on them. They lay all their eggs, then they sit on them. Great horned owl lays that first egg, starts to incubate that first egg. The second egg comes a day or two, sometimes as many as 2 to 5 days after the first egg. And then egg 3 comes after that second egg. And guess what? They generally hatch in that same order which the eggs were laid. So there is an oldest and youngest with 2, and an oldest, middle, and youngest when there are 3. As one of 6 children, I'm very sensitive to the family dynamics. So I wanted names that reflected their ages. So Bart, Lisa, Maggie. 2011, or pardon me, 2012 brought one of my favorite Owlet photos. Yes, you just can't help but go, oh, Christopher and Velvet. And I've been saying this for years. What I'm about to say predates the events of the last year or so. But I've been saying this for years. I can show you documentary proof that I've been saying this for years. But these owlets are so cute. They are so sweet that I'm confident they could give Vladimir Putin diabetes. And I would like to see that field tested, frankly. 2013 brought another one of my favorite owlet photos where they had 3 again. And I love this photo for many reasons. One, it takes me back to that beautiful May day where I just walked into the woods and, oh, hey, hi, hey Mark, how's it going? But I also love this photo because it shows the 3 they had that year, Lawrence, Edward, and Stuart. And here they are at the 3 months of age, and look at the difference in appearance because they are different ages. On the right is Lawrence, the oldest owlet, who looks way more like an adult, especially compared to the owlet on the left, the youngest owlet, Stuart. And the middle owlet, guess what? He's the one in the middle of the branch, Edward. And they left the nest in age order, and they left the parents' territory, a process called dispersal, in age order, leaving in July, August, and September, respectively. And then most recently, Charles and Sarah had 2 owlets in 2015, Grace and Harold, and here's Sarah feeding them. And I really like to show this photo. Yes, they're super cute. Your brain can't almost handle it. But I really like to show this photo because look at how big the owlets are. They're 2 months old. 2 months old. And they're huge. They hatch from a pretty small egg, about the size of a small chicken egg. And then their bodies explode in size. But here's the curveball. Try this one on, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Imagine a child with the body of a teenager with the abilities of a toddler. Terrifying. And sometimes people say, oh, that sounds like my freshman in high school. And I say, do you bathe that child? No. Do you dress it? No. Do you cut him its food? No. Do you hold its hand while you cross the street? No. Why? He's 15. She's 15. You don't do that. So, one thing we can generalize about great horned owls, whether they're in Illinois or Idaho, Maine or Missouri, Mexico, Manitoba, Maryland, anywhere you have great horned owls, they're one of the first, if not the very first bird to nest, because the youngsters take so long to fully mature. They are usually with the parents for about 7 to 8 months.
Wow.
And then the owlets leave, and it's not like the parents say, well, darling, the children are gone. Where should we go on holiday? You know, Capri, Nice, you know. It's more, well, there they go. Okay, that was our break. Back to work. I'm one of 6 kids. My parents had us in 10 years. Charles and Sarah, in a little under 10 years, had 23 kids, almost 4 times as many. So, hug your child and be grateful that they grow in all ways at about the same pace. So let's watch some owlet antics. And there's another super cute, fuzzy, fluffy one. And I really like to show this video from 2010. They had 3 owlets that year. I named them Reese, Malcolm, and Dewey from the show Malcolm in the Middle. I like to show this video because it shows lots of different things. This is April 2010, and the owlets are 2 months old, and they're huge, but it's a windy April day. They're playing a classic sibling game, follow the leader. One owlet flies to a tree, to a branch even, and the others follow. But it's a windy day, and look at how clumsy they are, and how bad they are at keeping their balance. And also listen for this sound. This is called a begging cheep. And this is the owl saying, Mom, Dad, we're over here and we're hungry. It's been 4 seconds. We're going to do it again and again and again and again. parents, you know what I'm talking about. So let's watch huge, beautiful, clumsy, hungry Alex play follow the leader. So if you saw that, would you think that's a baby? No, that's huge. So amazing to see them. Now, the following year, they had two Owlets, Monica and Dalton, and they were playing follow the leader, but they had a slightly different result on this moment.
There comes Monica. Whoa, right above her brother. Branch broke.
So the branch literally broke under her, but thankfully she was able to find another place to land. What if that had gone wrong? What if that second branch had broken, or there wasn't a second branch? She could get injured or worse. So it's tough out there. So every day it's like, well, let's stay safe, let's stay good, and let's hopefully progress to the next day. Now, one of the things I love the most about the Owlets is their curiosity. The whole world is new to them, and they're just fascinated by everything. I hope you'll find this to be a lovely example of that curiosity. Now, this is Grace in June of 2015, and she was on a low branch of a fallen tree, and a firefly begins to fly around her, and she's totally fascinated by it. She's going to demonstrate that neck flexibility we mentioned earlier. And I don't care how much yoga you've done, don't try this anywhere. Over 100 days. Pardon me, she's just fascinated by that. Like, wow, I've seen these things fly, but this one lights up. Like, what the heck is that? Cool. So amazing to see that curiosity and just see them slowly mature. And it's, it's literally, you'll see them on Sunday, and then you'll notice on Friday that, oh, they're doing that behavior a little better. They still have a long way to go, but they've progressed. Now, a few weeks after I shot that video, we had a very sad development. Sarah died. On July 18th, 2015, I found Sarah in this very unusual area of their habitat. And just from her posture and her expression, I knew that she was ill or injured. And I found her before sunset, and we talked about how around sunset they wake up, they stretch, they broom, they hoot, and then fly. I stayed with her for an hour after sunset, and she did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was very concerned. Came back the next morning, and she was still there. Now, an owl will sometimes go back to the same spot, sometimes for days in a row. But there was such a difference in her behavior that it told me, you haven't left. You've been here all this time. And the comparison I couldn't escape was like, wow, this is like seeing somebody at the hospital. You're not where you should be. You don't look well. You're still here. This isn't good. I saw her that second night, and she was still there. Charles hooted not far from her. Not only did she not hoot back, she didn't even look in his direction. And my concern just grew and grew and grew. And she was there for over 36 hours. And I came back the following morning, July 20th, and that was the last time I ever saw her. And my friends and I looked all over for her, alive or otherwise, never found her. So very sad time. I miss Sarah to this day. I miss her every day. She is the most amazing female great horned owl I will probably ever see. As an individual, as a hunter, as a mate, as a mom, just off the charts. But through this sad time are two very important silver linings. And the first silver lining was that the owlets had reached a very key stage where the parents stop feeding them. Now, eventually the owlets have to leave the parents' territory. The owlet's own hormone levels will encourage them to leave. This is a very effective tool of the parents that helps further encourage the owlets to leave. We're not feeding you anymore. You might want to write this down. Rob, I'm not sure you're quite a hand
I'm getting it from both sides.
Good. You know, sit them down. We love you very much, and you're done. Nothing for the fridge, the pantry, the cupboard, the deep freeze, no deliveries. You're done. So Charles and Sarah had already stopped feeding the owlets a few weeks before Sarah died. And if Sarah had died 3-4 weeks earlier or months earlier, the owlets probably would have died too. Just not enough food. And who protects them from predators? Mom. So that was a big silver lining. The other silver lining was I've been so lucky to see so much with Charles and Sarah, but there is a big thing I had not seen. How they became a pair, how they courted, how they dated. They were already a pair when I saw them. I was like, oh, hey, you already put a ring on it. Cool. I had read about great horned owl courtship, but I had never seen it. I thought, well, maybe I'll get to see Charles court and find a new mate. Well, looking back on it, I think it's safe to say that Charles and I had no idea what we were in for. Non-stop owl drama whirlwind begins. The term whirlwind is very appropriate. Charles has had 5 mates in the last 7 years. Now, ladies, don't get judgy on Charles. As you'll see, he's had to have 5 different mates for very practical reasons. So, in September 2015, he courts with 2 females. Courting is dating. It doesn't always work out. 3rd female shows up in October 2015. They become a pair. This beautiful female. Come on, Max. There she is, Olivia. And she was a small female. Very interesting to see how much smaller she was, about Charles's size, maybe a touch smaller. And they mated, but she did not nest. She did not pick a spot and lay eggs. And Charles and Sarah nested successfully 10 years in a row before this. So very interesting to see this. And then as we got to the spring of 2016, she started to spend time and distance away from Charles. Olivia did not listen to her Tammy Wynette records. Stand By Your Man, a big hit song. And a larger and very aggressive female showed up and shoved out Olivia. We haven't seen Olivia since April of 2016. This female was so aggressive, not only did she shove out Olivia, she started to chase Charles around. There was only one name I can give to this female. Samantha. As in Samantha from the TV show Sex and the City. So, fascinating to see what happened with Samantha. Charles wasn't happy about this. But males are adaptable. 10 days later, he's like, well, you're here. Kind of cute. And it became a pair. Now, Charles and Samantha tried so hard to have young. She nested 5 different times in the next 3 years. Yes. 2 of those years, 2018 and 2019, she attempted to nest twice. All of the nesting attempts were unsuccessful. So tough to see that, fascinating to see that, but so much work by Charles and Samantha, but no owlets. and then she died in April of 2019. That was a very complex situation. It was so complex. We see signs that she was at the same time injured or ill, and at the same time perfectly healthy. It was very weird. Finally, things in late March became more clear, and we were able to get her to a place called World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis County. It's a raptor bird of prey rehabilitation and education facility. She was in very bad shape and improved and then leveled out and declined. So on April 5th, I'm in the park. She had been dead for 2 days. She had been out of the park for a week. And I found Charles in a group of pines. I call the trio conifers. There's 3 of them. And I kind of wonder aloud, I wonder if and when another female will show up. And I look over at the quartet conifers, only about 30 to 40 feet away, and I see this huge, beautiful female. And I named her Danielle, and they courted that night and became a pair. And she attempted nesting in 2020, and we were so excited because the nesting was going just great. And then at a key point, the eggs about to hatch or the eggs just had hatched, the nest failed. Raccoons got into the nest. Now, I wasn't too mad at the raccoons. I was very sad about this, but I wasn't too mad at the raccoons because just in that nesting season alone, Charles and Danielle had gone for raccoons several times. And over the years, how many raccoon orphans, widowers, and widows had Charles and Sarah and others created? Probably quite a few. So after the nest failed, a month after the nest failed, she just disappeared. We have no idea what happened to her. Did she leave? Did she die? Did she get injured? We have no idea. Haven't seen her since March of 2020. Well, Charles usually had been single only for days or weeks. Well, he was single for months. The longest I've ever seen Charles single. He was single the rest of the spring, all of the summer, and then as we got into the fall, courtship season for great horned owls this time of year, Charles was still single. And it was a very weird fall, still no signs of Danielle. Charles not sitting down. He definitely was letting the ladies know that he was single by hooting a lot. Hi, I'm hooting. This is my territory. But you're not hearing a female, are you, ladies? Come on in. Yeah, Lord of the Ringlets. I'm single and ready to mingle. Still, no sign of females for months, but he did court briefly with a female in late October. And was very hopeful then, but on one of those nights, we had a love triangle. Charles was courting with this female, and another male started to call, and the female went over to the other male. But Charles kept working. Finally, this female returned to Charles's area, and on January 4th, they mated. But even then, it wasn't clear if they were a pair yet, because she disappeared for the next 5 days. And then finally she came back. Finally, by mid-January, I could say 2 very important things. Yes, they are a couple, and yes, she is nesting. Took me a while to name this female. There she is. Say hello to Sophie. And she and Charles, thankfully, had Alex. That was the first Alex we had seen since Sarah died in 2015. First seeing them in early March of that year, named them Neil and Lyle, and there they are with Sophie in the nest. Super cute, and it was so cool to see Alex for the first time in many years after all the tough, challenging years. And great to see the 2 youngsters again. They left the nest in April, and again, they kind of do things in age order. So Neil, the older one, went before Lyle. And I got to see a really cool behavior that I had never seen Alex do. Great horned owls, most owls, really don't drink water that often. They get a lot of the liquid needs that they have met by the prey they eat. So remember Charles, for instance, with that small rodent or that bat, when he eats that bat, or when he delivers it to Sarah, there's a lot of liquid in that rodent or that bat. And they're like, okay, I had a meal and a drink all in one. I will see the adult owls drink occasionally, but I've never seen owlets drink until that year. And I got to see them drink and bathe twice. And the second time I saw this was just before sunrise on a very clear day. So I got to see Neil and Lyle bathe and drink.
If it gets
This was a blazing hot summer day. Like we're kidding, Alice. So that was amazing to see that. Everything was going just fine until 10 days after I shot that video. I was out there with a bunch of my owl friends and mentees. There's Charles and Sophie and Neil and Lyle. Everyone starts to wake up, stretch and groom, but not Lyle. And he starts to lean forward and his eyes are closed or barely open. And I start having flashbacks to seeing Sarah. And my owl friend and mentee, Aaron, and I said, we're coming out super early tomorrow morning. The next morning, I'm in my home. I'm literally putting my keys in my pocket. I'm about to leave. My phone goes off, and it's a message from Aaron. Lyle is dead on the ground. So very tough to see that. We had never seen a dead owl. That was very tough.
Is that the one that was drinking?
That was one of the ones drinking. So yeah, they had two that year. And the younger one, Lyle, died. And we were able to have Lyle's body examined by the World Bird Sanctuary and tissue samples examined by the St. Louis Zoo. And Lyle that died of a double whammy, viral and bacterial infection. They weren't able to determine the cause of that, but that was very tough. Thankfully, Neil continued doing very well. And as we got into the fall, where around the time that he was going to leave, Neil became a bit of a boomerang baby. He'd be gone for a day or two, and then he'd be back. Like, hi, what's for dinner? Can I have $20, $40? Finally, Neil dispersed in November. Last saw Neil November 11th. But Sophie, we saw very little of Sophie since late June. As we got deeper into the summer, it became, well, we could look for Charles and Neil, or we could look for Sophie and Bigfoot. Well, let's not waste our time looking for Sophie or Bigfoot because we haven't found them. So let's go look for Charles and Neil. So that was very interesting. And then as we got into the fall, a female started showing up in the core of their territory. And we weren't sure who it was. We saw similarities and differences to Sophie and markings of behavior. My friends and I did a lot of analysis looking at pictures and videos. Is that Sophie? Is that a different female? We weren't sure. And everyone kept asking me, is it a different female? I said, look, there's no one more than me that wants to be able to answer that question, but I'm still not sure. Let's just keep watching. And in the meantime, things happened. They started to mate, and she started to nest. A tree that had been used many times before. Egg laying, first saw signs of that on the 19th of December. This is one of the earliest nestings I've ever seen. And we still weren't sure who it was, but meanwhile, life just keeps rolling on. And we first saw signs of hatching on January 20th of last year. So think about that. They have to have babies in the winter. You know, other birds are like, I'll see you in March, April, May, June. And the owlets are like months old at that point. So first saw owlets in early February. And then the question always is, how many owls? This is a tough question to answer. You have to be very patient and just watch and see what happens. But they had 2 owlets, and we named them Betty and Sydney. Betty named for Betty White, Sydney for Sydney Poitier. And amazing to see them. And finally, mid-March, I could make the call that the female is Sophie, that we are very confident is her. It took a long time to do that. A very collaborative effort, but it was still very tricky. Right around this time is when the owlets left the nest. Fledging is the process of a bird leaving the nest. And yes, you see all the fluffy feathers? My girlfriend has a very scientific word for this. My girlfriend is a catalog librarian. So she works at a university, and catalog librarians are all about describing things in very precise ways. But Wendy also loves cute animals. So she calls those fluffy feathers the fluff. So it was interesting when they left the nest, one stayed very close to the nest and one went very far, but not who you would expect. The younger owlet went about 100 yards from the nest, Sydney did, and Betty, the older owlet, stayed very close to the nest, but eventually they ended up together. Amazing to watch them grow up, see the parents take care of them. And then they dispersed in September. Betty, the older one, went first, and then Sydney in October. And here's Betty just before she fledged, and here's Sydney just before, not fledged, dispersed, pardon me. So you can see how much they've grown up and matured. And this is months later. I mean, you know, like parents, think about having 2 to 3 kids a year, raising them to the age of 16, 17, and then doing that all over again. Yeah, hug your children. So we had another curveball from Sophie. We have not seen Sophie since June 8th. We still haven't seen Sophie in the last now 9 months. We have no idea what happened. They never answer my emails, for one thing. But did she die? Did she get injured? Did they have a divorce? I don't know. Just gone. But in the meantime, life continues to go on. A new female showed up on September 28th. Beautiful female. She and Charles had a major intense courtship that first night. And from right away, we could say that is not Sophie. Different behaviors, different hoots. And that's one of the cool things is that the hoots, just like our voices, are unique to the individual. You know, if I called any of you tomorrow on the phone, you would not recognize my voice. You'd probably be like, okay, it's some dude, just from my voice. Now, if I called my mom, she's 86, 6 children. She hears any of our voices on the phone. She knows, oh, this is one of my 6 children, and it's this one of my 6 children. And never mind out of the 6, 7 billion people on the planet. She also has caller ID. Well, I think that's fair at the age of 86. So we knew it wasn't Sophie. Very intense courtship that night, and I named her Virginia. And things progressed very quickly. They started to mate in early November. It's one of the earliest matings I've ever seen. We saw them mate 11 times over a period of several weeks. She started to nest very early, December 4th, and first sign of egg laying was a wet, rainy night. Yes, I was out in the rain on December 15th. So really exciting about this. And then things happen. We haven't seen Sophie since Christmas Eve. And we are sadly completely certain that she has died. And the eggs that she laid, since she was not there, not only to incubate them, the eggs have to be rotated. Since she was not there, the eggs did not make it. So one of the signs of this was Charles delivering prey to her, calling to her, and no response from her. That happened very memorably, very tough to see on December 30th. And a few days after that, he went to the nest and took food out. And that was even more a sign of, oh, yeah, she's gone. We have not been able to look in the nest because he's been perching very close to it, and we don't want to disturb him, and he's still been using that as a spot for him to store food in, which they do very intensely when they have young, but they still do it all year long. So, very sad development. I mean, people were coming up to the park and, hey, what's happening with Charles and Sophie? And one of the great things about what I do is that I get to share the good news, but also one of the tough responsibilities, I have to share the bad news. So people are smiles and then frowns. But in the meantime, I've said it before and I keep saying it because it keeps happening. Life continues on, and Charles is courting with a new female. And I am this close to making the call that they are a pair. And now I have to come up with a name for her. And that's a good responsibility. Now, sometimes I get a little pushback, and people say, well, why do you name the owls and babies? I also name the trees that they use. And I say, I think I've earned it. And people, once they think about that, they're like, yeah, you have 17 years and 200 nights a year. So, very excited to see this. So, just in conclusion, this is just a taste of my many years of studying these great horned owls in this amazing park right in the city of St. Louis. You can learn more about the owls and my work with them in many ways. You can ask the library to have me back. I've got 3 different talks on owls. One just on their hunting and feeding behaviors. It's such a meaty subject. And if you want to see even more of the cute babies, I have a talk just on mating, nesting, and owls. And then if you want some help finding the owls near your homes, I have a talk called How to Find an Owl in Your Neighborhood. You can also learn about the owls, my work with them online, very active on social media, including blog, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I want to invite all of you, this is a standing invitation, if you're ever going to be in the St. Louis area, to contact me and come join me for an owl prowl. These start at that key time, about an hour before sunset. We go out for about 2 hours. I lead them on weekdays, weekends, and I lead them all year long. The never-ending cycle. I hit a new record in 2021 with 96 owl prowls that year. For an owl prowl, please email me. If I didn't give you my card, please ask me for one. They're also on the counter over there. Email me 3 to 4 dates that work for you. I'm taking out groups of 1 to 6 people. If you have 7 or 27 people, I'm happy to schedule as many owl prowls to accommodate everyone. I'm often booked up 2 to 4, sometimes 4 to 8 weeks in advance, so contact me well in advance. Every once in a while I can say, yes, I am available tomorrow, but usually it's like someone said, hey, can we do one on Friday? I'm like, in May, yes. And that's a good challenge to have. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I really want to thank Jennifer and all of her colleagues at the Carbondale Public Library for having me here. Really appreciate your time and interest, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you. Erica.
How many
Yes,
years?
but
How big,
saw her hand first.
how big are these pellets? And if they're eating the duck head, and that's.
That was one of the biggest pellets.
Those
And I-
pellets.
And I meant to say that video we saw, that was, in case you were wondering, that was a big pellet. That was I've seen bigger, that was the 90th percentile.
I don't think I've ever had one dissect that's been like that. They're mostly, rodents.
They can, depends on what they're eating.
Yeah.
If you want to see the biggest pellet I've ever seen, go to my YouTube channel, search pellet December 2014.
Do you collect most of the pellets when you see them, whether?
I don't.
Okay.
I examine what I can in the field. Pellet size can really vary because the pellet injection we saw, that was one big pellet. It can also come out in several different pieces. So pellet injection and pellet size can really vary pellet what you find. So you can't always tell the type of owl by the pellet. I mean, I've seen Charles drop tiny little pellets, and at the same time, huge pellets. And I've seen him. I'll never forget this one night. I was with my friend and owl mentee, Brenda Henty, and Charles dropped a pellet in many parts. I said, "Wow, that was 5 pieces." She said, "No, it was 4." I said, "It was 5." She said, "No, it was 4." I said, "No, it was 5." We were both secure and confident in our analysis. And I had filmed it and we played it back. She said, "Okay, yeah, you were right. That was 5 pieces." Sir, you had a question?
How old, how long do they live?
How long do they live? Great question, you guys. This species, great horned owl, is the most widespread, commonly found owl species in North America, found throughout much of Latin America. There's still a lot we do not know, including average lifespan. We don't know it. We know record lifespan in the wild is into their 20s, but we don't know average. We don't know if females live longer than males or the other way around. Charles, if I could ask Charles one question. Mark, you have one shot. It would be, do you like this water bottle? It would be, how old are you? Now, I have a minimum age for Charles, and as the Brits say, that's not small beer. I have a minimum age for Charles based on 2 good points of data. One, they generally don't have babies until they're 2 to 3 years old. And the first year I saw Charles and Sarah, they had babies. So take 2 to 3 years, add it to 17, he's at least 19 to 20. Now, the record ages for wild great horned owls are into their 20s. So he's an older guy. And one fact that I have to be very upfront with myself and other folks is with Charles, there's less sand in the hourglass. And we had a very scary time starting in mid-May of 2020 when he just disappeared. And my friends and I searched all over Forest Park, and he wasn't young then, the same equation. I mean, we were searching areas we had never seen him before, just to cover every base we could. And after 6 weeks of not finding Charles, I posted and shared on social media that he was most likely dead. Very sad news and a very tough, sad year. I was very touched by people's reaction to this. 2 weeks later, he's right at the core of this territory. So even before this, from very early on, our first priority every night is to count heads. And I was very happy in my hotel room, getting ready for this talk today, to get a message from my owl mentee and friend Alexis that, oh, I found Charles in this spot and I found the new female in this spot. Okay, cool. But every day, in a small way, I prepare for bad news. And we've seen bad news happen. When you study life, you're going to have to study and deal with death as well. So it can be tough out there. Yes, ma'am.
So when that does happen, is it likely that another male will move into that territory?
Very likely. That's a key question. A big behavioral change in Charles in the last 4 to 6 years is the area that he has gone out to declare as his territory, not only declare but defend as his territory, has shrunk. And other males since then have come closer in. And I mean, in distances and places that they wouldn't even dare do a second time, never mind many times. And we've had an intruding male for the last year and a half. We have the not so charitable nickname for him, Numbnuts. And we have seen Numbnuts right in the core of Charles's territory. I mean, like 30 to 40 yards from Charles. And it's not like, hi, I'm on your block, or hi, I'm on your lawn. It's, hi, I'm in your front hallway and I'm reading your mail. So very interesting to see this, but Charles keeps attracting ladies. And if, when we come to that sad point, what I think will happen is that his mate will stay there and not tall, and a single male, single owls, male or female, single owls are called floaters. And a floater male will come in and say, hey, this is nice territory. And oh, bonus, there's a female here too. Now, he still will have to court successfully for that female, but that is what I'm expecting to see happen. And speaking of females, you may have noticed I've mentioned a number of my owl friends and mentees, and they've all been women. I did a talk for a women's photography group in the summer, and it got me thinking, how many men have I mentored and how many women have I mentored? So I broke out an Excel spreadsheet and wrote down the names. Twice as many women as men. And that's not a reflection of me, they're just reacting to how beautiful Charles is. And sometimes I don't know who loves Charles more, the female owls or the female humans. Because he's such a striking guy. Yes, ma'am.
How close will they let you get to them? I'm sure every night they kind of get used to that guy and the plumage. But have you been able to get closer over the years?
Yes, I have. And I love the way you asked this question. It is very carefully done, very gradually done. If this table was the core of their territory, my first 2 years, I stayed at the edge of the territory, often with a tree between them and me, because I did the math. I said, I don't think any of you would do this either. I would not mess with a raccoon. I really don't want to tick off, anger, disturb an animal that eats raccoons. Very slowly, very carefully, I gradually moved in closer to them. And this is something I do very carefully. Again, dark, muted colors. When I go out socially with my owl friends and mentees, I wear pink and white and yellow and bright blue. They're like, oh, you have other clothes besides brown, black, gray, and so forth. Because while 13 million people visit Forest Park every year, no matter what they do in Forest Park, we all end our time in Forest Park in the same way. Pack up, go home. When I'm there with Charles and anything and everything else, I'm in their home. We need to be good guests. So yesterday, I had a little time in the afternoon before I drove down here to Carbondale. I went and I saw Charles, and he gave me this look. And I know that look. And that look told me, right now, I'm not happy with you. And I acknowledged that look and left where Charles was. And I saw him from a different angle, and he was asleep and relaxed. And that was what happened, how he was feeling right then, right there. So I get closer, but it's something super carefully done. I even wrap my keys in a rag so they don't jangle as much. I react to their body language. I've got to learn their body language. And I never take it as a given that they know me, recognize me. If there is an element of recognition and or trust, it's something I don't take as a given, and I try and earn it and build on it every day. So, bit of a long answer, but it's a very important topic. Your hand, yes, please.
So you wouldn't be wearing this when
Would not be wearing that. Not at all. That is lovely attire that you have on. Almost exactly the wrong thing to wear. When people join me for an owl prowl, before we meet up, I send them a very detailed email about what to wear, where to meet me, when to meet me, and also what not to wear and what not to bring. And I did an owl prowl a few years ago with a group of photographers. You want to see my imitation of me from that day? I walked in to meet the photographers. This lady was wearing a completely rabbit fur hat.
Oh no.
Great horned owls love to eat rabbits. And I said, man, hello, I'm Mark Glenshaw. I'm going to be leading the owl prowl. You got the email, right? Okay. you have two options. One, you can take off the hat, or you stand over there, and the rest of us will stand right here and wait for the magic to happen. So thank you for double checking. Very nice attire, not right for an owl problem. Yes, sir.
When they hoot, do they harmonize with each other? Is that how they? Or is that just two different sounds that they make?
It's two different sounds. Is it technically harmonizing? If it is, I haven't heard anyone say that. I would be very disappointed in one of my owl friends and mentees, Erin. Erin recently got a major promotion in her job. She's been one of the assistant concertmasters for the St. Louis Symphony, fourth chair violinist since she was 20, fresh out of music school. Like being the starting shortstop for the Cardinals. Like, wow. She just became the second chair violinist, associate concertmaster. She has perfect pitch, literally perfect pitch. She would know if they were harmonizing. And if she's heard them harmonize and she hasn't told me, I've got a bone to pick. But I think she would.
So I'll be curious because when they make a sound, is that like two people conversing, or is that
Very much so.
making a sound and the other one kind of follows that sound, so that kind of
It's a multi-level, it's conversation between the two, but it's also saying, yes, this is our territory, stay out. It's how that bonding process. So, I mean, we've talked about how long it takes for the owls to mature. That pair bond from the duets is incredibly important. You can't have the longest breeding cycle of any owl in North America, 8 to 9 months on a first date, singles bar, Tinder basis. You need to have a serious pair bond. Now, the comparison of the male hoot to a French horn, I've been saying that for years, but I have two very good endorsements of that comparison. Several of Aaron's colleagues have come out from the symphony to see the owls, including two French horn players. Folks who make their living playing the French horn. They said, oh yeah, that sounds just like the French horn. Good comparison. I said, I thought so. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. Yes, ma'am.
Do they converse with other species of owls? Or is it more just like, this is our territory, stay out?
There's that, but since they are right at the top of the food chain, everyone to one extent or another listens to them. And it's always hard to say, because sometimes you'll have the owls calling right by animals that they can eat, and the other animals don't seem to be paying attention to them, but they're paying attention to them. We had a bit of a developmentally challenged owlet in 2014, became the owlet that wouldn't leave. He was the youngest owlet, and I thought, okay, at the latest he'll be here till September, October. It was late December when that owlet finally left, and he was showing signs that maybe not all the cylinders were firing at once, because I saw him several times hunting and calling at the same time. I mean, even Elmer Fudd knows, be very, very quiet, I'm hunting rabbits. And his owlet's like, hey, I'm hunting, over here, and the prey disappeared. But yeah, the downside of being an apex predator, they are apex predators. I had never imagined that an owl could be an apex predator. The downside of being an apex predator is that they don't have a lot of friends. It's great when owls say, hey, come on over for dinner, and people are like, oh, what are you having? It's a surprise. It's you. I mean, there are times, this is documented, that great horned owls will eat the two species of owls larger than themselves, snowy owls and gray owls. So animals really react to them, but that can also be a very effective way of finding the owls. So like those squirrel warning calls and other warning calls, this is all stuff we talk about and how to find an owl in your neighborhood. Great way to find not just owls, but other predators. Owl, hawk, snake, your neighbor's cat. I was doing a talk down the road in Marion a few years ago at their public library. My girlfriend joined me for that trip. We're in the parking lot of the library, and I heard squirrel warning call, I was listening, I was analyzing, I was literally about to say, oh, I bet it's the neighbor's cat, and there's the neighbor's cat. So definitely for your local owls, listen for warning calls. Hearing the calls tonight, we were discussing Robin and Hannah earlier, you have some owls near you. Do they sound like great horned owls?
I think so.
Yeah, it's more likely that,
Okay.
you know, from
Not that.
So next time you hear it, even if you can't see them, and I apply this to all, take out your phone, record it, email it to me, and I'll do my best to say this is this is that. Sometimes it can be a little tricky, and many owls do not have a different hoot between male and female, but we're very lucky that great horned owls do.
How big is their territory generally?
Generally, it's a great way to put it because there's huge variations of so many other behaviors. Decent rule of thumb for great horned owl territory, it's about a square mile. And there are, right now, we know 3 other pairs in Forest Park. And one of those pairs, very interestingly, is right between 2 of those pairs. And one of the more recent pairs is in an area where we've seen the other pairs before, and usually those pairs have not stayed in that part of the park as very long. So territory is animal real estate. And what do real estate folks always say is the most important thing about a piece of property? Location, location, location. Yes, ma'am. Uh-oh, she forgot. I have a question for you. What's your question? Yes.
Fish, you said amphibians.
Fish, reptiles, yes.
Do they actually like?
Grab it like a bald eagle or osprey? No.
No.
It's generally not known how they catch fish. Well, I use this rod and tackle, and it's generally thought that they wade into shallow water and grab it. But eating all these different things requires different hunting techniques. Bat in midair, rodent on the ground. One of the fascinating things we'll see most summers in the late summer and early fall is Charles on the ground hunting insects. Sometimes short flights to a low branch and then back down to the ground, walking, running. Really cool to see that. So all these different tools in their toolbox. And so that helps them live in all these different, not just regions, but habitats. It's very easy to list the habitats where you won't find great horned owls because it's a very small list. It's like everywhere else. Yes, ma'am?
primary sources of food for like bald eagles. I mean, there's a roadkill.
A lot, yeah.
Is it for owls as well, or?
There's a growing body of research and literature in science about owls as a whole, scavenging, thanks to trail cameras, night vision, things like that. It's becoming more apparent that owls scavenge more than had previously been thought. And I've never seen the owls do that, but as I've mentioned in some of this, they will store prey. That's a fascinating behavior. They do it very intensely when they have young, since they need so much food. But they will do it throughout the year. It's called caching prey. It's a fascinating behavior because it's completely instinctual. They're not taught it. They don't learn it. They just do it. And yeah, amazing to see them cache prey and uncache prey. The first time I saw them uncached prey was Sarah in 2008. She flew to this large tree where I've seen them now cache and uncache prey quite a bit. And a few minutes later, she came flying out with an eastern cottontail rabbit. And I thought, well, I'm not an expert on eastern cottontail rabbit, but I'm pretty sure they can't climb trees. And oh my gosh, she just uncached prey. And I wouldn't call that scavenging per se, and it's another thing is, well, if you're caching prey in dead of winter, can it get frozen solid? Yeah. And owls, including great horns that live in more colder climates, will uncache their prey and sit on it. I am microwave, here we be.
What's the effect been of West Nile virus on the population here? I mean, there's been a big one in this area.
West Nile can and will kill great horned owls, unfortunately. For cause of death was Sarah. I can't rule that out. Samantha died of a viral infection. We don't know. They weren't able to determine the cause, but it was a viral infection. Lyle died of that double whammy, bacterial and viral infection. And it may have seemed somewhat casual that I mentioned that, oh, the World Bird Sanctuary performed a necropsy on Lyle and tissue samples were examined by the zoo. No, I don't take that casually. One of the things I am hugely humble and grateful for that my network of people and institutions has grown, and that they did this of their own volition, of their own goodwill, and hey, let's help this project out. I mean, most people would have said, hey, I've got a dead owl. They'd be like, that's fine. We're busy. We've got other things we need to do.
I know that we've noticed that the population of great horned owls was declining rapidly after West Nile because the population of skunks massively increased.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And as apex predators, they are a real. I'm blanking on the phrase right now. They're a very important species. I mean, just like water quality, we're not getting as many frogs or toads. You can really track water quality declines with declines in populations of amphibians like frogs and toads. Indicator species. Yeah. Thank you. That's the phrase I was looking for. You're not going to have an apex predator living in an area and reproducing successfully year after year unless you have all the ecological building blocks that make that possible. So the fact that Charles has been in Forest Park so long and been in his area of Forest Park so long really reflects the quality of the ecological state of the park in large terms, but also within his territory. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
When they have the youngs,
Mm-hmm.
do their markings resemble the parents? Can you identify a young from a parent by
It's got his
the
dad's
patterns
nose.
and things?
You can see some resemblance. I mean, at a certain point, a great horned owl is a great horned owl. There's the second largest park in the city of St. Louis is called Tower Grove Park, or the southern part of the city. Beautiful park. And they've had two pairs of great horned owls there for years. One pair very well established. And I remember seeing the male of that pair for the first time. I thought, wow, you look like Charles. Like you could be uncle, cousin, brother, father, something. That may have just been how I interpreted it. But I haven't seen super strong examples because they are so similar. But you do see differences in markings and behaviors from in the youngsters. I mean, Betty and Sydney were very different owlets from day one. All of Charles's females have been different from each other. And these are fascinating things to see. An interesting human nature thing is the longer I've been studying Charles, the more kind of skepticism I get. People kind of say, well, how do you know it's Charles? I'm like, we were hanging out for over 300 nights a year for 17 years. I'm pretty, I just met Robin today. You're not I have two friends named Robin. You're not them.
Yeah.
I'd be like, wow, what are you doing here? Things like that. But we also have a funny human nature thing. We see an animal, and then we see the same type of animal maybe a day later or 3 weeks later, and we say, oh, there's that bald eagle I saw. No, you're seeing a bald eagle.
Right.
Yeah, like that bald eagle I saw that I photographed. I have no idea if I've seen that eagle again.
some of them look like they have very distinct marking.
Oh, they do. Oh, they're definitely individual markings, very distinct.
But no resemblance between.
No disresemblance. So yeah, very, resembling, but not like, oh my gosh, that's completely an identical one. Part of it is also, that takes so long to fully get their adult feathers. So yeah, really interesting to see that. I saw your hand. Did you remember your question?
It's actually a new one.
It's what?
New one.
A new question. What's your question?
How big are the babies when they leave their parents?
Oh, they're as big as their parents. I mean, that's one of the, talk about difficult to tell apart. You get to a certain point in the summer sometimes where just looking at them, just from their appearance, you can't tell, is that an adult or is that a child? And then you see their behavior and you say, oh no, that's an owl. Why? You see this big owl, and then you see it fly. Oh, it's flying pretty well. And then you see it land very badly. Like that. That's an owl.
Still learning.
Yeah. Still learning. Oh, and if there might be some questions from Zoom, yes. So yeah, it can be really tough to tell sometimes the babies. The funny human nature thing is when they have babies, and I'm leading an owl trial, I'll tell people what I've told you all today, that the babies are very big. And you kind of see people listening and they're not listening. And then they see the babies, oh my gosh, that's huge. Yeah, I told you that 10 minutes ago, but okay. Sometimes we all have to see things. Any questions?
No, there was no question.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your great questions. Thank you for coming. I'm thrilled to be here. I hope to return.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
appreciate it very much.